Hello, welcome to Movie Ballot. I'm Richard Eve, Heatray UK, take your pick. And in this series, we look at movies, TV, and occasionally other stuff through the lens of the political compass test. Well, not the political compass test, a political compass test. One of my own construction, based on cross-references of multiple existing tests. There will be a series of propositions, broad political talking points, if you will, after which we will come to a decision about where the movie, show, or thing positions itself on the political spectrum. It is unreliable. This week, and our first proposition.
Business is more important than art.
No shit.
Some people are naturally unlucky.
Probably, yes.
Homosexuality is immoral.
No, not in the view of the show, clearly. Although, I do wonder why Hollywood still seems to feel like the L is more palatable than the G, but there you go.
An eye for an eye.
For the most part, yes. The guerrilla cells that oppose the Galactic Empire certainly don't seem to place much stock in pacifism or acquiescence. Direct action, buddy. Although Andor himself is not what I would call a vindictive person. He's not preoccupied with revenge or teaching people a lesson. He's brutal, but he's not cruel or calculating. There is a moral difference between cruelty and brutality. The scene near the beginning of the first episode, where a tense street encounter ends with Andor killing a man, is not, in my opinion, a mere foreshadowing of Andor's killing of the panicked rebel agent in Rogue One, but something far more sympathetic. These Union thugs are out for fun at Andor's expense. He indulges their cruelty very generously, until circumstances force a fatal decision. If things had gone differently, there's every indication that they would have happily killed him and dumped the evidence in the river. The scene is a great illustration of the mindset of the bully. The two antagonists enjoy Andor's anxiety. They can't face the ugliness of their own desires, so they create a narrative that they hope will mitigate the violence they so obviously want to commit. You're in the wrong place. You jumped the queue. You spilled my drink, etc. All of which Cassian tolerates because he's not petty and he's got bigger concerns. When Andor realizes, however, that he's under immediate threat, he strikes out, accidentally killing one of the thugs. The other antagonist, realizing that Cassian may now have no choice but to kill him too, or face death or imprisonment at the hands of the Empire, quickly reverts to a submissive role and pleads for his life. He does the same thing he was doing at the beginning of the scene. He lays out a cover story for his actions. We get a sense of how scared everyone is of the ambient bureaucracy in this world. It is to no avail, however, and Cassian shoots him point blank in the head. Not an ideal outcome, I'm sure we all agree, but the point again is that Andor is illustrating the difference between cruelty and brutality. He has no interest in causing or prolonging suffering. When he realizes, after desperately scanning himself for a solution, that there is only one way out, he acts with what we might charitably call merciful swiftness. Okay, tangent over.
Institutions should be regulated.
Well, it's not addressed emphatically, but we can assume that the opponents of the Empire are in favor of institutional accountability.
Authority should always be questioned.
Fuck yeah. Although no one seems to question the authority of this guy, or this guy, and all things being good and fair, they probably should. The authority that requires the most urgent questioning, though, is of course this one. So pick a side. Be partisan. That's not really the true spirit of the proposition, is it? Oh well.
Some races are better than others.
Well, I'm not seeing much non-human representation here, and the ones that we do see are a bit sort of local. Okay, I put down the facetiousness. Ethnicity here is a non-issue, which is exactly what we should expect. Moving on.
Class divides more than group.
I'm guessing yes, but not by a huge degree.
The rich must exercise philanthropy.
Yes.
There is no right or wrong, only different.
Of course, this being Star Wars, there is right and there is wrong, although the distinction here is certainly less high contrast than it is elsewhere in the saga.
People should conform to traditional roles.
No, not really.
Religion and morals are the same.
Not in the eyes of these characters. But they're wrong, of course, because in fact they live in a Manichaean universe in which good and evil, dark and light are real agencies that battle it out in a spiritual dimension and whose shadowy influence is what drives the actions of people. You don't have to believe in the Force to do good, for instance, but if you act in a good way, then you are acting as an agent of the light side regardless of whether or not you believe you are.
Sex outside marriage is wrong.
In the case of the Chandrillans, sex inside marriage is probably quite wrong as well. I mean, don't they get married at like 6 or something?
Unlawful violence is sometimes justified.
If I am catching the drift of this show, I'm guessing yes. So, after our insurgent campaign, where do we find the TV show Andor? Well, we find it here, perched almost precisely on the border between green libertarianism and kleptocracy. I don't know if there is a term for this, so for the sake of intellectual vanity, I'll call it semi-kleptocratic libertarianism. So what the hell would this look like? Well, you would have small government, freedom of movement, free enterprise, freedom of speech, of personal expression, of religious practice, gender expression, etc., etc. The downside of this is that you have very little regulation. There's very little state protection for the individual. You have the right to do pretty much what you want, but there's no legislative enshrinement of those rights. I said it. There we go. Legislative. That's a kind of society that revolutions can produce if they don't properly plan for peacetime. A kleptocracy, on the other hand, is a state where the government treats the population as a source of personal income. Basically, picture the Sheriff of Nottingham. Under libertarianism, this, however, would be restricted, since reduced government and reduced administration means less taxation, so potentially less financial exploitation on the part of the state. However, deregulation means that leaders are able to be less than accountable, let's say, when it comes to where their money is spent. And that's a picture, perhaps, of where the rebellion is in this show. I mean, just corrupt as fuck, although not necessarily a picture of the values being showcased by the show itself. The goal of the revolution is not to install a revolutionary government. It has resigned itself to be a bloody footnote in a story that's really about saving civilization from the dystopia of excessive order. So if you have a stake in that sort of thing, then you might enjoy this show in which you have to pretend that all the shit Star Wars didn't happen. It's like Where Eagles Dare just came on the telly and you want to play Where Eagles Dare with your toys, but you only have Star Wars action figures and maybe this Action Force bloke, but you've got the mail-away survival kit, so maybe you can get away with him being a rebel. Give him a gas mask. There you go. That's very old Star Wars. But despite these artful customizations, there's a nagging sense of inauthenticity at the back of your mind. This isn't the tastefully genre-blurring playtime you hoped it would be. It feels a bit more like Star Wars gone wrong. Your maladjustment is revealed through the hyper-violent sadism of your play. What's wrong? Did Daddy leave you? It's no good, you eventually decide. These flavors just don't mix. It can't be done. But it can be done. It can be done 40 years later by grown-ups. The fact that they've done it so well is amazing. Well, not amazing, but remarkable. Of interest. Increasingly, properties like Marvel, DC and Star Wars are being stretched to accommodate types of story that represent a tonal departure or tangent. Disney wants to tell different types of stories under the same franchise umbrella. It wants adaptable, flexible IPs. This has become a cause for concern. It wants to turn popular franchises into entertainment empires in their own right, each one a little Disney with products to cater for every demographic. Monopolies within monopolies. And it's happening, and we are letting it happen with thunderous applause. Here's a conversation from 1995.
Shall we go to the cinema tonight? There's a new film I really want to see. Sure. What's it about?
Here's a conversation from 2015.
Do you want to come and see the new Marvel film? Oh yeah, I like superheroes.
Here's a conversation from 2035.
Do you want to go to the Star Wars tonight? Sure. What's it about?
Here's a conversation from 2055.
I called work and told them I needed to
Take an MCU day.
Well, we may not be there yet, or perhaps we already are there, I don't know. That's the scariest thing, isn't it? To have got there without noticing that you've got there. But hey, Disney can do what it wants. It's not going to break the world, I guess. What fandom needs right now is a pop counterculture. With social media and groups of online enthusiasts, it ought to be the easiest thing to coordinate, spread original DIY intellectual properties and unauthorized fan canons in the form of memes and forums, to construct these things as proper, credible rivals to their corporate counterpoints, which are, in the end, just interpretations, regardless of whom owns what in terms of trademarks. I like the idea of canon as much as the next middle-aged nerd, but if Disney are going to treat it in a way that is brazenly offensive to the intelligence of the viewer, then it's up for grabs. And the upside of it is that your vision is just as valid as anyone else's. Or maybe you could do something better. I'm pretty sure you could do something better. But I don't have any money. I don't have any reach. I don't have enough time. You don't need any of that shit. Here, look, check this out. Monster trucks in space. There we go. Give it a nice font. Embellish it with some imagery. There you go. I just done a thing. It's out there. All existing and shit. Didn't take any time or money. It's not really very good, is it? Well, I like it. Shut up. The point is, though, if we all, as nerds or whatever it is you want to call us, produced just a little bit more and consumed just a little bit less, then pop culture would be a much healthier place. Much healthier. Disney wants to imagine it all for you, and that leads pop culture towards creative atrophy. But as a self-aware pop counterculture, we can still pick and choose from the high street, but at the same time mitigate the worst effects of saturation. Some might say it's too late. Others might say, we're already doing that and it's working out great. What I want to say is, it's an issue. It's not as important an issue as global economic meltdown, but it is more important than, say, who plays Superman. More important than even slightly more serious things, such as copyright law. We should celebrate what we love. That's what John Campea says. What he means is, celebrate what you love or go and do something else. Well, I don't want to go and do something else. And I want to question whether or not the existence of Star Wars, Lucasfilm, Disney, Marvel should be celebrated. I want to question it indefinitely and encourage others to question it indefinitely, because we need to look at the cost of corporate cultural engineering. What price will we pay in the future, and what price may we already have paid? That's definitely much more important than who plays Superman. And it's also much more interesting and more fun. It's always more fun when there are bigger stakes, isn't it?